Hello, welcome to IELTS Podcast. This episode is going to be all about pronunciation. We're going to look at some of the components of pronunciation, goals, how to be understood, problems regarding being understood, and some factors that influence pronunciation. So there's quite a lot of information here in this podcast, so I think to get the maximum benefit from this, you could take notes, improve your note-taking ability. You're also going to improve your vocabulary, and also you probably, if you implement some of the instructions or tips, you're probably going to improve your pronunciation, or at least find out where the problems are, becoming more aware of what factors influence pronunciation. So let's get started. Let's have a look at some of the factors to start off with. Age. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, we cannot really influence this factor. So what I mean by age is maybe the amount of time you've been learning the language, or maybe the amount of time you've been living in the country. And this does have an effect. Logically, the longer you are there, the more likely you are to speak with that accent. However, this is quite there's one thing I want to make clear here. Obviously, you need to be integrated into that country. So what a lot of people can do is maybe go to a foreign country and only hang out with people from their own country, which is kind of ridiculous, really. But this brings me on to the next point, which is exposure. Exposure to the language is also going to affect how you affect your pronunciation. And this is a factor that we can have totally under our control. So we might as well use it to our own advantage. And for example, somebody who's living in Poland and listening to podcasts 24/7 is going to have more exposure to the English language than a Polish person living in London and hanging out with Polish friends and working with Polish friends. So this is what I was going to say about the exposure level. So because it's under your control, I strongly recommend you take advantage of this and just put your life in English. And I've said that a million times before. Now, the other factor that's going to affect your pronunciation is your own language. So if your language is rather similar to English, and these languages might include Dutch, German, some of the Scandinavian languages. I don't think Finnish, but definitely Norwegian and Swedish. These languages are similar to English. In fact, English is a Germanic language, and it's got a lot of Norwegian words, Swedish words, German words, and Dutch words, and especially Dutch and German grammar. So this is why it's probably easier for people from those countries to learn English, and it's probably why they've got better English writing skills and better scores. However, you don't want to beat yourself up about this, okay? And you don't want to be comparing yourself to these people because they've just got a slightly natural advantage. So for example, if you're if you're Chinese and you want to learn Japanese, you've got an advantage there, and the Scandinavians would find it much more difficult. So there's no point comparing yourself with the other people. I've just made a note here that the race is long, and it's with yourself at the end of the day. And by the way, if you do start comparing yourself with other people, this is a guaranteed way to fail, because the only comparison is with yourself and improving your own self. So anyway, let's carry on. Now, the other factor is your phonetic ability. Okay, this basically means your ability to distinguish between sounds. So it's like your ear for the language. If you can hear the differences between boss and bus, if you can hear the differences between certain words and stresses. And this is an ability that everybody's got, otherwise they wouldn't be able to speak their own language or understand their own language. So you've definitely got this ability. Now the key is can you improve this ability? Can you adapt it? Can you make it can you become accustomed to other languages and other accents? So this is also under our control, and I think one of the best ways is through exposure. Let's increase the exposure. Start listening to IELTS practice tests, start listening to stuff that we enjoy, material that we enjoy. Now, this brings me on to the next one. Onto the next point. What's your goal regarding English pronunciation? Do you want to speak like a native speaker? And that's quite ambiguous, because native speakers come from Liverpool, from Scotland, from London, from Yorkshire, from all over the place. And maybe your goal wouldn't exactly be to speak like a Liverpudlian, okay? One friend said that, okay, if you want to speak like a Liverpudlian, you might as well sound like a criminal, but that's a bit unfair. Thankfully, I doubt it that I've got any Liverpudlian listeners. Anyway, so let's carry on. So what's a more realistic or what's a more intelligent goal? That's probably to be understood. Okay, and this goes back to similar concepts in the essay writing. Okay, with your essay writing, you want to be understood. You want to make sure that the examiners understood that you've got the task response under control. And likewise, when you're in that speaking test, you want to be understood, because even though you might be using the best vocabulary or the best grammar structures, if you're not being understood, then the examiner can't give you any points regarding if you've actually answered the correct question. So just bear this in mind. And here's some quick exam tips. When we're actually in the exam, we sit up straight. I've just done that now. I've reminded myself. We sit up straight. This helps the airflow. We breathe slower. We talk a little bit louder. This also increases comprehension for the listener. We speak a little bit slower. This also increases comprehension. And we also try and vocalize. That means we don't swallow any of the end parts of the word. Like I was talking to a student from Venezuela, but she's living in Toronto, and everybody there in Toronto, in Canada, in Toronto, they say Torono, and that's just their accent, but they swallow the T, they don't bother saying it. So if you're not familiar about that, it might be a bit difficult to understand it. If the first time you hear it, you're like, what's Torono? What's Torono? Obviously, the context is going to help you as well. But what I'm saying is that if you're vocalizing, then you're not going to swallow a single sound. You're going to pronounce every part of the sentence. And that just makes it crystal clear for the listener. This is what I do a lot, actually, just from my teaching experience, because the class goes a lot faster if I'm vocalizing, and everybody can follow along there. However, I've been teaching so long now that this vocalizing skill or vocalizing effect that I'm doing has now crossed over into my everyday speech. So some people say that I don't sound English anymore because I'm vocalizing all the time, whereas native English speakers will speak faster, closed, and probably use more colloquial language. So yeah, I remember actually just a few months ago, somebody in the train station said, "Oh, you've got excellent English skills." Like, cheers, thanks a bunch. Anyway, let's carry on. So some quick tips there for improving your intelligibility. Now then, let's go on to some of the aspects of pronunciation. So the rhythm. English has a certain rhythm, and it's got a tendency for some of the stresses or the strong beats in the sentence to actually fall on nouns, adverbs, adjectives and verbs, which are basically the words that are important to the sentence. So if you just go back, you'd have probably heard me when I said rhythm, and I was saying one of the aspects is rhythm. I stressed the rhythm, and I did it unconsciously, but this is just part of the language, that it's got a tendency to put importance on these words, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, and the adverbs. So if you introduce that into your pronunciation, you're going to improve your intelligibility. Now, the stress is important. I've got a friend, he's from Paraguay, and he always laughs at my pronunciation from Manchester, because he says Manchester, and he really exaggerates the chest, and that's where the stress is in that word, in that noun. And likewise, to pronounce the capital city of England correctly, it's London. Okay, London. There's a bigger stress at the end there. At the beginning, London, but there's two stresses in the word. So this basically will come about through practice and through having a good ear, improving your listening abilities. And like I said a million times before, a really good way to improve your listening abilities is to transcribe. Okay, and you can even mark the letters and the words where the stress is falling. There's plenty of online exercises to do this. Perhaps transcribing a song isn't the best idea, because the words are going to be bent and stretched and squashed to fit the music, fit the lyrics, and fit the melody. However, podcasts are really good, and I'm pretty certain you can find some online exercises for this. Now then, sentence stress. This corresponds with the rhythm, what I was saying about before with the rhythm, that the important part of the sentence will be the part that gets the most stress. Okay? So if I say there's a lot of people in town, okay, the stress there was probably in people and in town. Okay? There's a lot of people in town. Now, if I said another sentence, I would, for example, there isn't anyone here today. Okay, or there isn't anyone here today. The stress is on today. Okay? Because I want to emphasize that actually today there isn't that many people here, or there's nobody. Okay? So depending on what's the important component of the sentence, will determine or help to determine where the stress actually goes. So perhaps this might be a difficult thing to practice, and it might be a difficult thing to master as well, but just being aware of it and starting being conscious of it will help you to incorporate it into your own speaking abilities. Now then, how could we use this in the IELTS exam? Well, if the examiner asks us, for example, part 3, and they're saying, what qualities do you find important in a friend? Well, if we were going to answer this, we'd say, well, some of the aspects or some of the characteristics I like to see in a friend are blah, blah, blah. But we've put a stress on friend there. We've reflected the sentence and we've put a bit of a stress on friend. We'd probably do this naturally if we were an English speaker, native English speaker. So there's no reason why you can't put a bit of a stress there, just a slight stress, and this will make the examiner understand that you're answering the right question. Okay. Now, if we were doing this for task 1, the examiner might say, so, where are you from? So you say, well, I'm from Venezuela. A lovely the capital city is my hometown. I've lived there for about 10 years, but I recently moved to Mexico, wherever you are nowadays. So it's just a case of recognizing the important part of the sentence. And this will also help you understand other people as well. If you're having difficulty understanding native speakers, especially English speakers who tend to speak a little bit faster, then you just listen for the key nouns, the key verbs, and you can get the gist of the sentence. So, those are some of the aspects. Now then, let's move on to the next component, which is being understood. So, some of the issues or some of the problems that we might have when we're being understood could relate to about 3 or 4 issues. The first one might be the stress, where we're putting the stress. Okay, if we're putting the stress on the connectors or some of the less important fragments of the sentence, then we're going to make it difficult for the actual listener because it just doesn't sound right. So some of the other problems might be related to your own language and where you put the stress, or maybe you carry over some of the components or aspects of your own language into English, and this can make it not really difficult, but it can make it more challenging for the listener to understand what you're saying. I'll give you an example. I have an Italian friend, and she always calls me Ben, and I have to tell her, obviously jokingly, but I have to tell her, I say, look, Ben has 1 syllable. Ben, it's not Ben, yeah? And Italians do this quite frequently. They'll put an A, a vowel sound, in the middle of the sentence, or in the middle, between words where it's not necessary. I think another funny example of this is the Italian man in Malta, or the Italian man in London. It's quite a funny YouTube video where it just takes it to the extreme. I'm laughing now because I'm thinking about it, but yeah, if you've got a few minutes, you might want to check that out, if you're just bored of preparing for IELTS. Anyway, and yeah, it's always good to laugh at other people's problems. So anyway, moving on. What I remember when I was in Taiwan, there's another incident. I had a friend, I can't remember what his name was now, but he always used to put la after it, and I think this is from Chinese, where they just put la in between words or at the end of words. So it'd be like, Ben La, are you going to the swimming pool today? I'd be like, what? Ben La? Is this a nickname? But then I heard him talk with other people, and he'd be doing it all the time. Are we going to the swimming pool, La? Yeah. And what I'm saying is that you just need to be aware of that if you are bringing any characteristics of your own language into your target language, which in this case is English. Now, another interesting issue or challenge that we might have when we're trying to be understood is we might actually delete some of the sounds that are necessary. And this is very frequent with the simple past. So a lot of students do miss the ED sound. Okay, so I watched a game last night. That ED sound is incredibly important because it dictates the tense. So yeah, if just being aware of it, hopefully we'll be able to avoid deleting that sound, missing it completely. Now the next issue is called substitution, and this happens when we might not have the sound in our own language, in which case we'll use a sound from I'm just getting mixed up now. So what I'm saying is that substitution, and this will happen when we don't have the sound that they use in English, or we use in English in our own language, so we'll substitute it with a sound that we do have in our own language. Now I'll give you a clue, I'll give you an example from Spanish. A lot of Spanish speakers of English will say da instead of the, or de, yeah? The birthday is tomorrow. And that's because they don't really have the th, the th, but they have the v or the d. So they say the birthday is tomorrow. Okay? And although it's legible, and you do get used to it eventually. However, it could be difficult for somebody who's not used to it, or for a German speaker of English to understand the Spanish speaker. Whereas if everybody learned the correct sound, then obviously it's going to be easier. Okay, so you might want to record yourself and just try and record yourself reading a text and then compare it to a native English speaker reading the text. And this way you're going to be able to just see if there are any differences. And this goes back to what I was saying before about improving your phonetic ability, your ability to understand other sounds and components of the language. Right, so that's everything. And if you want to take this a bit further, if you are serious about improving your language and you've got these goals to be understood, or you want to speak like a native English speaker, then there's a few links for more resources actually on the blog. If you just find this blog post, just put IELTS podcast pronunciation, and there's also a course there. And of course, if you get the speaking confidence course at sentenceguide.com, there's quite a lot of videos there showing you not only how to attack the exam and how to get the confidence you need and improve your fluency, but also to working on technical aspects such as pronunciation and being understood by the examiner. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. If you've got any suggestions, send me an email. I'm always looking to improve them, improve the site. And yeah, if you did enjoy it as well, you could leave us a review at iTunes. That'd be fantastic, or on Google Play, wherever. That'd be awesome. And yeah, hope you're enjoying these podcasts, and have a fantastic day.